This is Geek Gab for Monday, January 6th, 2024. We are back.
We are so back.
Welcome to 2025. No, I didn't even think about that. You know, normally when I have a big date change or something, I think, okay, I've got to concentrate. I've got to concentrate and think about it because it's a new year. It didn't even occur to me to concentrate. I was thinking about everything else in the world. I actually don't have anything in front of me that has the new year listed. Like everything that I own has days. It tells me it's Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. They have dates. It'll tell me it's January 6th. Nothing tells me the year on anything I do. Like Twitter doesn't tell you the year. It tells you the time, but I'd be happy to tell you posted 2 hours ago. Will not, doesn't tell you the year. So yeah, it's 2025, right? I'm right about that.
It sure is.
Okay,
Welcome to the future, Daddy Warpig.
just checking. I just wanted to make sure. Wow, 2025. What a year. So exciting. Let's see, what else? We are back. Your host, Dornall, and me, Daddy Warpig. We took off a couple of weeks for our Christmas and New Year's, so Merry Christmas, Happy New Year's. And let's see, was there anything else? We watched a couple movies. We're going to do some movie reviews. I did a post today for some GM advice I'm writing up for something I'm doing, and I wanted to talk about that because I didn't get any good feedback from anybody. So I'm just going to toss it out there and let's see what the audience says, or maybe that'll prompt them to say some stuff on Twitter to give me some feedback. And also, there were a couple of remarks that were made on Twitter that I felt like needed to be covered. I felt like they needed to be discussed. And so there was one from a week or so ago that I don't know. We should discuss it at some point. We're going to be discussing another one that's from the same third-party 5th edition D&D source book called Fire in the Pants, Forge of Foes. I'm sorry. By someone called the Lazy DM, and a couple of collaborators of him had a big Kickstarter earlier this year. And apparently they decided that they really felt like gaming was just too gosh darn right wing, that all of gaming up until now is, despite the vast leftward surge of gaming since 2012, it's still just too gosh darn right wing. And so they felt like what tabletop role playing needed was a hard left turn. And they made some comments from the book. I haven't read the book. I didn't participate in the Kickstarter, but entire pages of it, like whole entire pages of it, have been posted, containing entire self-contained sections of the game. So I feel I can comment on them. And the three big ones, there was one about gnolls, the jackal monsters. There was one about colonialism. And I want to talk about those maybe next week or something, because I just want to get to this one about goblins, because it's small, it's short, it's sweet, and I feel it's so perfectly, absurdly what it is. And I'm going to say what it is after I read this section. So, Forge of Foes, headlined by the Lazy DM. whose name came up in the comments, whose real person name, Sly Flourish. I doubt that's his real name. That's what he's going by, other than the lazy DM. And Harmony Ginger is going on some kind of podcast tomorrow to debate this. I don't think there's really a debate. This is colossally, vastly, gargantuanly idiotic. It is not astronomically idiotic. It is not galactically idiotic. It is idiotic on a scale that the very edges of the idiocy are expanding faster than the known universe and have been lost beyond the bounds of the 16 billion light years of the observable universe, never to be seen again. That's how vast this idiocy is that has been contained
That is
in this
some
book.
quality idiocy. That's just the type of idiocy we've come to love and expect from the folks in the tabletop gaming hobby.
So I want to read this, and I want people to pay attention, because I'm going to draw out what the obvious flaw in this is, besides being completely wrong from the beginning. I want to draw out the obvious flaw. So there is the big flaw of being wrong-headed at all. But hidden within that big flaw is an even bigger flaw that's so subtle you might miss it, because you're being barraged with, the loud flaw that you might miss the even bigger flaw that's kind of subtly hidden in there. So here we go. One of the most standard adventuring hooks in fantasy games goes something like this. Goblins are attacking the village. The characters need their help. It's a straightforward setup. It's fun, but as written, it embraces the explicit idea that the goblins are attacking the village simply because that's what goblins do. So when that hook comes to mind or appears in a published adventure, put yourself in the frame of mind that attacking villages isn't what goblins do across the board. Then figure out what kind of goblins might engage in that sort of behavior. For example, goblin cultists are attacking the village, or goblin bandits are attacking the village. Goblin refugees are attacking the village. Goblin men's rights activists are attacking the village. Any of these alternative scenarios sets up the same basic adventure, but in these other scenarios, goblins aren't the noun. They aren't the agents of conflict simply because they exist to create the conflict. Rather, they're the adjective giving more context to who the agents of conflict are, letting you explore the story of why they've embraced conflict as a choice. Did you spot the subtle flaw hidden in the monumental, fundamental flaw of the section?
I'm not picking up what you're putting down, but I tell you what, we have talked many times at length on this idea. We've done an entire episode on the nature of monsters, both as adversaries in your game and as representations, physical manifestations of chaos and evil. So for me, that's the obvious flaw. Warpig, where were you going with that?
They're saying that you shouldn't, and this is a phrase that's common in certain areas, you shouldn't other, and using other as a verb, fictional monsters. It's morally wrong to other fictional monsters, to portray them as the other, because they're people just like everybody else. So you should be nice to fictional monsters. You shouldn't other them. You shouldn't portray them as being bad people. To say that monsters are bad people is morally wrong. And yet, in this section, they are othering real world people with different beliefs. That is, men's rights activists. So it's bad to say that goblins attack a village just because they're goblins. But it's okay to say goblins attack a village just because they're men's rights activists. Because
Just in
as we
case it,
all know,
yeah.
as everybody knows, men's rights activists just go around attacking villages.
Man, they are the worst.
This is an utterly perfect example of the Platonic ideal of hypocrisy, to where they are mincingly, minutely, exactly concerned over your social justice attitudes towards fictional creatures, while at the same time being broadly, callously, brutally cruel, assuming the worst evil of real world people. That is psychotic. But it is very, very typical of the kind of people who are obsessively, ideologically driven. They're very selective
It's
in
on
how they
brand.
apply their supposed morals. Because it's easy to be empathetic towards fictional beings because they can be anything you imagine. But actually displaying empathy and kindness and virtue towards real people in the real world is hard. Because real people have real flaws. So it's easy to say you love things that don't actually exist. Because there's zero chance that you personally will ever have been attacked by a goblin. There's zero chance that you personally will ever gotten in an online fight with a goblin or had your sister killed by a goblin or whatever. But men's rights activists are real people. And some of them are great people and some of them are real jerks. And some of them will yell at you and swear at you, and some of them will be, great people to sit down and have a drink with. But they'll all disagree with the sort of person who wrote this material. And so it's really, really hard for a person this obsessed with politics, this obsessed with crafting every single thing they make into propaganda. It's very, very hard for them to stomach anyone who disagrees with their propaganda. And it's easy to stereotype anyone who disagrees with them as being the ultimate evil just because they disagree, because it's lazy. So, but there it is. The same time they've wasted 2 whole paragraphs just here saying don't other fictional monsters, it's morally wrong. They're othering real world people, and that's perfectly okay. That is the huge but subtle flaw contained in this work. It seems like most people reading this kind of missed that. They missed that. I mean, they thought this was cringe. They said, "Oh, this is cringe," but they missed the implications of the moral implications of why this is. That's all I have to say about this. I've covered it. So we can move on.
Yeah, that about covers it.
It's sad, see people spend so much money, donate to this Kickstarter, and it seems like they were not expecting this to be as preachy, or preachy at all. People said that his channel isn't like this. So the book coming out of this Kickstarter being as preachy and political it is kind of a kick in the teeth to people who wasted money on it. It is, it's a bait and switch. So very, very unpleasant, very, very consumer hostile, very audience hostile. All right, we're going to stick with tabletop role playing for now before we jump into movies. And this is some game master advice I wrote for a little something I'm working on. So this is intended to be word for word what would go in a tabletop role playing rules book. So when a game master is reading the rules book and they get to the chapter Game Master Advice, this is the section on rules lawyers. All right. Rules lawyers try to argue the GM into accepting a bizarre interpretation of the rules as the only valid one, just because it benefits them in this specific instance. Frequently, this is based on a typo, a rule which can be maliciously misunderstood, or one which may be a genuine oversight. Sometimes they lie about the rules or ignore examples proving them wrong. And this is in all caps now. The clear intent of the rules is what matters. The text exists to communicate this intent, to explain it clearly, and to illustrate it with examples. Never let players force a misinterpretation of the rules upon you, no matter how much supposed evidence they can muster. You are the final authority. On the other hand, sometimes you may have misunderstood the rules, and other people may be able to help. Players can offer good advice, but so can message boards, errata, or emailing the creators directly. Don't be afraid to learn.
Well said. You're doing a good job of identifying the sort of two possible outcomes, right? The two possible reasons, or the main two reasons for rules lawyering, or that sort of interruption. I knew a game master who was very free form, very rules zero. He always said he was a fun first game master. And he took personal offense when players would offer help with the rules. He gave an example of someone, one of the players was going swimming and they were sort of not sure how swimming worked, and one of the other players says, "Oh, it's on such and such page of the Dungeon Master's Guide," and he took offense at that. But you're addressing that, right? I mean, that's not what rules lawyering is, but that's how he felt. Like, hey, don't tell me the rules on the Game Master. That's not what rules lawyering is. In fact, I think it's a great asset to your table when there's a player who's willing to look up a rule, a player who's not actively playing, who will look up a rule for you while you're busy handling one thing or another thing, right? we all played with that guy that, is just trying to get one over on the DM. And that's no fun to play with.
Yeah, it is. It's really difficult. It's really difficult to uh, it's really difficult to play in a game with someone like that, especially when you know that they're gonna freak out or have a breakdown if they don't get their way, right?
Yeah, it's one of those things where they're creating this situation where there's uh, you know emotional or social pressure to do one thing, right? And this goes back to one of the many reasons why we say just play the rules.
See, and this is the thing in AD&D, Gary Gygax put in a paragraph about how you shouldn't allow barracks room lawyers to um, force a quote from the rules on you and so on and so forth. And that has been um, creatively interpreted by people over the decades. It has been taken to mean that the rules themselves don't matter. That you can change any rules uh, in AD&D when playing AD&D. It has been taken to mean that you can change any of the rules at any time because of this quote. And they say, well, yes, well, obviously Gary Gygax meant because of this quote that you can change any rule whenever you want to, and that game masters should uh, change this. It's in the afterword to the D&D. What he says is this: it is the spirit of the game, not the letters of the rules, which is important. Never hold to the letter written or allow some barracks room lawyer to force quotations from the rule book upon you if it goes against the obvious intent of the game. I believe that what he's saying, don't allow a barracks room lawyer to force quotations from the rule book upon you if it goes against the obvious intent of the game. I think what if he had written that a little bit more clearly, what he might have said was the clear intent of the rules is what matters, right? The
Yeah, yeah, and I don't have the page quotes in front of me, but that's supported by a lot of other places in the book where he makes it clear that there are certain places where the DMs the DM is in charge of the setting or the milieu, and um, the DM has um, a prerogative to make sure that the game makes sense, that the milieu makes sense, that there's obvious intent behind some of the rules, and so that completely reading through the Dungeon Master's Guide in particular would support your theory.
um so yeah, I feel like um I feel
Nailed
like
it.
these two first two paragraphs are uh, a more precise restatement of the intent of Gygax's clear intent in what he was saying. That um, rules lawyers are not people who are forcing quotes from the rules. Are you in good faith that these are the actual rules? They're trying to force you to follow the rules. I think that those are generally people who are misinterpreting the rules for specific reasons or picking cherry picking quotes that are taken out of context to specifically not follow the clear intent of the rules, and either misquoting them or taking one sentence out of a big paragraph and saying, "Well, the rule says this," when the rule clearly does not say that. And if a rule clearly, if it is not the intent of the rule to do what they're saying it does, then you absolutely should not allow it, no matter what sentence they've picked to pull it out of context to try and say, yes, this is what the rules mean. The point of a rules lawyer is that they are not genuinely trying to understand and apply the rules. They are trying to distort the understanding of the rules, because that distortion will help them in this specific instance. And furthermore, when you're looking at running the game, you just have to know that, yes, it's your job as game master to understand the intent of the rules. And sometimes, because you're imperfect and TTRPGs are kind of a complex thing, if you get it wrong, you also have to be willing to listen and adjust it and get it right. And I think the assumption that people have made because of this afterward is players quoting the text of the rules doesn't matter because the rules themselves don't matter. And I've seen people saying that all the time. And I think that it's absolutely the opposite of what Gygax said in this paragraph. And I think it's absolutely the opposite, because he says the opposite in several other places in the DMG, in this very book. He clearly didn't mean that, because he says the exact opposite in the AD&D DMG. So I think people, I think this untrammeled belief that what they call Rule Zero is how DMs should run things, absolutely do not think that helps the game. That's just rules lawyering from the GM's perspective, not the player's perspective. So,
yeah, I agree. And one of the things that I've been sort of beating the drum on as far as the game master's role is being in charge of the setting, the milieu. And, to Bradford Walker makes a really good point, sort of on top of what you were saying. If you comprehend that the prime directive of the Dungeon Master is to maintain the integrity of the game, then it's clear that the rules of the game are what gives substance to what that is, right? And so when the Dungeon Master comes in with that mindset of, I'm in charge of the integrity and the setting of the game, and to your point, when they're open to learning the rules and being open to getting a good understanding of the rules rather than focusing on winning or not, then you get to then you get the best of both worlds. You get to have a good game.
So, okay. And one sentence in here, for those of you who are writing role-playing games, or designing a role-playing game, one of the things you want to keep in mind when you're writing the game is the second sentence of the second paragraph. The text of your game exists to communicate the intent of the rules. So you need to know how you intend the game to be played. You need to write the text clearly so it communicates the intent. Explain it so that the people reading your rule book can understand you, and then illustrate it with any necessary examples, so that any areas of possible ambiguity can be cleared up. It's painstaking work, and it often helps to have other people read the book, not just play test it to make sure the rules work, but read it to make sure that they understand what you're saying, so they can ask you, hey, what do you mean by this? Or what do you mean by that? And obviously, playtesting is the best way to do that, because if you hand someone the rule book or the rules and they sit down to play and they get it wrong, they don't understand what you intended, then you can talk to them after and find out, okay, you know, what made it seem like that's what I meant, and then you can address it and clear it up. And that's of course assuming that people who are coming to your rule book want to run it properly. If you have people coming to your rule book who don't want to run it properly, they're beyond the bounds of help anyway. You can't help them, so you don't have to worry about them. All right.
And I don't. Well said. I really liked that post. I regret that I have but one like to give on Twitter.
So, anyways, the rest of the book should be up to that quality of clarity and organization and intent when it's finished. I'm just hoping it just takes time to come at things in the right direction, to make sure that I understand them well enough to be able to put them down and push forward and do it. Like, one of the things that occurred to me earlier today, it's obvious that initiative in tabletop role playing games is boiled down to who gets to go first in a combat round. And we got initiative because we inherited it from war games, from tabletop war games. And I'm familiar with the work of the Air Force colonel who developed the concept of seizing the initiative, the OODA, Observe, Orient, Decide, Act loop, that this concept was developed for. But I'm wondering, in terms of war games that reflect Napoleonic tactics or medieval wargaming tactics, I'm wondering if the concept of seizing the initiative was identified in earlier ages of warfare, and what specifically it was meant to indicate in those games it came from before they became RPGs. Just, random chance that indicates who goes first, or was that random chance supposed to reflect some real battlefield condition like the OODA loop, or something similar? And I'm going to have to find some of the people in the BroSR have been reading those old games and playing those old games, and I need to ask them that question, like, where did initiative come from out of these war games, and what did it originally represent? Because I'm coming to a point where I just need to understand the topic on a deeper level, for some of the things I'm thinking about, for some of the things I'm doing. So, a project in which you've run into a lot of concepts that you have to think about on a deeper level than that, so you can put them together properly, so you can put them together clearly and well, just takes time.
I would talk to your man John Mollison about that. He's he's a historian on war games, but he's also really connected with a lot of people in the hobby. So I look forward to hearing about your research there.
But anyways,
that's enough gaming. How was your holiday? Watch some movies, watch some shows.
Yeah, I watched a movie yesterday, despite the internet problems we were having then, which I hope it doesn't seem like they popped up during the show, so I hope not. And watched a movie yesterday, went and saw NOSFERATU in the theater today. It's really interesting, the two movies, they're kind of thematically linked in they're two very different movies. Tenebrae is it's an Italian giallo by Dario Argento, who didn't create the genre, but he became the master of the genre. And giallos are kind of these shocking, they are usually fairly mundane movies. They usually don't have a lot of supernatural elements to them, but they're very extreme and shocking movies that are thrillers. And they're sort of like that French theater that used to have stage plays that were so violent and lurid that would draw people in, that had also a lot of sensual elements that I can't remember the name of right now, and I wish I could. It's a Victorian. It thrived during the Victorian era. They had a satellite show, I believe, in London. The Grand Guignol. That's it. The giallo movies are sort of a spiritual successor to the Grand Guignol, even though the Grand Guignol had a lot of supernatural things in it, werewolves and things like that. So these giallo movies, have you ever heard of Dario Argento?
No, this is new to me.
Okay. He was very, very big in these giallo movies. Tenebrae itself, and I just found this out today after I watched the movie. I did not know this when I was watching it. The British had a group of films that they banned for being too violent and too lurid, too sexual. And this
Okay.
film was made was released in 1982. So you got to understand, too sexual then was much, much different than it is, 42 years later.
Sure.
But the British called them the video nasties. That was the term that they were released, or that they were given by, I believe, the press. And this movie, the uncensored version of it, he's an Italian director, could not be seen in Great Britain until 1999. It was illegal in Great Britain. And it was released in a heavily censored version in 1984 under the title Unsane. And there were 39 of these video nasties.
Oh boy.
That were, and they were video nasties because they were released on VHS and then banned on VHS. I don't know if it ever got a cinematic release in the theaters, but they were VHS tapes that were banned under the Video Recordings Act. And I'm going to read a quote to you from Wikipedia. Deemed harmful to audiences, video nasties were strongly criticized for their violent content by the press, social commentators, and various religious organizations. So, I did not know this until after I watched the movie yesterday. And I have to say, as someone who has seen, I think, 8 of the 10 Saw movies, I did not find it as perhaps excessively violent as people in 1982 would have. And I understand that my standards for fake cinematic violence are now very, very different. But I also want to reiterate that this is not real violence. And it's not violence that's presented in an approving or endorsed manner. To get up on a soapbox for a second, people who attack violence tend to do so because they think that depicting violence at all is a bad thing. And whereas I think children should not be viewing gory or violent movies, I think our modern standards for violence are way too extreme. I think that showing someone punching somebody else ought not make a movie R-rated automatically. That's insane. That is incompetent and insane. Showing a kid punching another kid does not make a movie R-rated. That is just absolutely ridiculous, and that's the current standard in America. Whereas a movie like Tenebrae should definitely be R-rated. But what matters with violence is not the degree of violence, but the moral context in which it is shown. That is, the theory is that violence in movies causes real violence in the real world. And it does not agitate for real violence in the real world unless it is presented in a moral context where perverse or brutal or antisocial violence is endorsed. So a movie in which a couple of kids go and shoot up a school and it is shown that that is a good thing or that they're justified or that, they really should have gone in and killed, cheerleaders or football players who picked on them, that's a movie that can actually cause real violence in the real world. Whereas something like Saving Private Ryan or something like even Hannibal, Silence of the Lambs or Tenebrae does not cause real violence in the real world because it is presented in a patently shocking manner, and all the forces of morality are shown to be attempting to stop this. The hero in the movie are trying to stop this. The person is referred to repeatedly as demented. They are shown to be insane. It's not a slasher movie in the American sense. It's not one teenager after another getting killed. It's a thriller, I guess, is the closest American equivalent, something like Silence of the Lambs or whatever, except it's a mystery. You don't know who is doing this, and the movie is a mystery trying to figure out why. So it's kind of a Sherlock Holmes mystery turned up on the shocking nature, and the shocking nature isn't from the explicitness of the acts. It's from Dario Argento, and this is the first movie of his I've seen, is a masterful director. I was just watching the movie and I was in awe of his direction. I was in awe of the fluidity of movements of the camera. There was one sequence that lasted for just about a minute where he's moving around in a house to keep you informed of where these two characters are and where their activities are. And then a third character is entering the scene, and you know who it is, or you suspect who it is based on what's happened earlier in the movie. As the audience, you suspect it's the killer, right? But you don't know because he doesn't show you the killer. And for a large part of the scene leading up to it, you don't know that it's not just a series of random events until all of a sudden it's like, oh my gosh, I think that's the killer. And the beauty of this being shot in 1981, it honest to gosh looks like a drone shot. Like he shot it with, a flying drone with 4 propellers and an iPhone on it, moving up and down between these 2 floors and moving in through a window along a hallway and then back out along that hallway and down these stairs and up these stairs and into another room. And it is so astounding to me. Throughout this film, the director has absolute control of what's going on. He has what he wants to put on the screen, and it is so beautifully done. He is an incredible director. It is amazing. Everything in this movie, every scene in this movie has a psychological impact, has an emotional impact that he wants the audience to experience, and he achieves it precisely to a pitch perfect example. There is a woman, and he wants you to feel like she has nothing but contempt for this man, and it is perfectly achieved, not just by the actress's performance, but by the framing in the scene, by how he reacts, and there's no lines being spoken. It's all gestures, it's all movement, it's all reactions, it's all the presence of other characters in the scene and where they're standing and the interaction of them with this woman. And it is, in terms of when it came out, it is shocking because of the gore. But despite the fact that the gore is not so extreme from my point of view, it is still shocking because of a straight razor features in this movie. It is still shocking because of the way that the straight razor is shot. He focuses on the blade, the way the light plays off the blade, the way it's presented in the scenes, the way that the killer operates in darkness, and so the blade is very clearly seen and it's gleaming. And I don't know how to explain how he does it, but at least to me, when I'm watching it, he made you feel the sharpness of the blade when there was no violence itself happening. You could feel the potential of the violence in the blade. It felt like something that would be cutting you, and you can imagine, you just flinched because of that razor and the potential for cutting and the potential for pain. It just was this very visceral feeling you just felt as you saw it, as the killer drew it and stuff. It was very, very visceral. It had a lot of not emotional impact, but an impact on a lower level, a bodily impact where you could, you just felt what that would feel like in your own body cutting you. And it was really just moving that way. And the scenes are shot in a shocking manner where instead of focusing on the blade cutting flesh and goriness and blood splurting and lingering on it, lingering on the gore. These things happen and they're done in a series of quick shots. And so, because he doesn't linger on them, they happen and they have an immediate impact. And then you're moving to something else. It's not so quick you can't focus on it. It's not MTV style rapid, shutter as in the shutter of a camera, rapid, staccato. What's that light that flashes really fast?
Strobe light.
Strobe light. Yeah, they're not strobe light, but they're just fast enough for you to get the feeling from it. Again, that body feeling, not an emotional reaction, but then something else happens to set that body feeling in motion to something different, and then something else happens, and he keeps on giving you this small series of little shots because each of these shots is perfectly set up to invoke those feelings, and he's already moving to something else really quickly. So it keeps that feeling of shock alive without having to dwell on anything, without having it to be gross or overwhelming or nauseating. It's just shocking enough to be like, and keep on giving it to you. And so it's masterfully done. It's an amazing feat of direction. And I don't know if his other movies are as well done, or if this is considered one of his best. But I could not believe that he was such an incredible director. So this movie, it does have some nudity in it. I guess extensive. It depends on what your standards for nudity are. I don't know. It definitely should be R. I've been watching like 1980s movies and 1970s movies, and after seeing like Sheena and Beastmaster and some of the sword and sorcery movies, it is not nearly as much as they would get away with in some of those sword and sorcery movies. But it's definitely more than anything made since like 1999. Because female nudity is forbidden now in Hollywood. You can show all the male butts you want, but you can't show any female nudity in mainstream Hollywood movies anymore. So beware the forbidden female form in this movie. But it's not. So there is some nudity in it, but lots more than is the norm nowadays. Not as much as used to be the norm.
That's true. I mean, those 70s and 80s movies, especially the sword and sorcerer ones, they were real exploitative.
So take it for what it's worth. And there's violence in it, shocking. I definitely would not recommend it for kids. I would not recommend it for people who are squeamish about violence or blood. If you want a good thriller horror movie that has a good mystery to it, let me give you a little bit about the plot. It's about an author of serial killer novels who comes to Rome to do, he's an American, he comes to Rome to do a publicity tour for his newest book. He's world famous. He's like, Stephen King, but for serial killer novels. And as soon as he shows up in Rome, a series of murders happen that are connected directly with his newest book. People are killed in ways that are detailed in his newest book. And the first murdered person is found with pages from his book ripped out of his book and shoved down her throat.
Dun,
And
dun.
people he knows are killed, and the killer is sending him letters and threatening to murder him. So he's involved, even though he has an alibi for the very first murder. He was on the plane when the very first murder happened. He's tied up with it somehow, and he's working with the police to figure out what's happening. And things are rolling forward because the bodies are piling up. So, yes, it was a thrilling movie. It was a viscerally moving movie. It was a very well done movie. I felt like my time was well spent as far as thrillers go watching it. And just Dario Argento is a masterful director. I have not watched any Hitchcock movies. I cannot compare him to Hitchcock. Oh no, I saw Psycho. Psycho is a great movie. And I would say that honestly, Hitchcock is a better director based just on Psycho. I haven't seen any of his other movies, but Dario Argento is because his work is so shocking and so bloody. I think he is not as lauded as Hitchcock, but I think he is. I think he's more visceral, and I think he is. I think he deserves to be spoken of in the same sentence with Hitchcock. He may not be as talented as Hitchcock, but he's definitely playing in the same league.
Wow, high praise.
So, if that sounds like a movie you want to see, I would definitely recommend Tenebrae. And so let's go ahead and talk about NOSFERATU.
NOSFERATU. Yeah. We'll do a lightning review to finish off the show. Robert Eggers, the guy who did The Witch and The Northman and The Lighthouse, he decided to remake the NOSFERATU, which, if you recall, DW, that's one of my favorite Halloween movies. I love watching NOSFERATU.
And I've never seen it.
You've never seen it. The
Not even
1922 Murnau classic. That one I continue to highly recommend. Go ahead and see that. So, NOSFERATU and Dracula have been public domain for a long time now, but Robert Eggers decided to go back to NOSFERATU, the German film, which took the story of Dracula, set it in Germany, and changed the names so that he wouldn't violate copyright.
And took out the cool Texan.
Yeah, took out the cool Texan. Spoiler, guys, if you haven't seen it yet, the guy from Texas who stabs Dracula with his knife is not in NOSFERATU, either NOSFERATU. So he went and made NOSFERATU with sort of a combination of like really hip Hollywood actors who are sort of up and coming and getting really popular. Nicholas Hoult plays the young man sent to Castle Orlok in the Carpathian Mountains to meet with the Lord, as well as Robert Eggers classics such as Willem Dafoe. When you need a guy to chew scenery, bring him along. And so we sort of tried to recreate that film from 1922. And it was released, late last year?
No, I think it was December 26th.
Just at the end of the year. Okay.
Yeah.
Wow. First impressions were, yeah, it was all right. I hate to break it to you, DW. That was my first impression. What did you think? First impression.
I thought it was a phenomenal movie. It was not as good as Tenebrae, but I thought it was really well done. I only saw it this afternoon, so I haven't had a lot of time to mull it over and digest all of my opinions. I thought the acting was really good throughout. I thought I can't compare it to the original Nosferatu. So I don't know if it's a step up or a step down from the original Nosferatu. Um, I think, like all of Robert Eggers' films, it reeked of authenticity. Um, and I noticed also a preview before the movie um, for another historical horror movie that's being made with the same level of care and attention to authenticity. So it looks like other people are noticing what he's doing and are making and releasing these kinds of movies, which I think is great. I would love to see them. I'd love to see them become, you know, more popular movies that take the culture of a time and place seriously and kind of bathe you in it, which Robert Eggers has done well. I don't know if he did that well in this movie. Because I don't know enough about, you know, Germany in the 1890s to be able to say. Um, Anyways, I thought all the acting was good. I thought uh, one of the things that's different about this movie than Dracula, and I don't know if this is a spoiler, I don't even know if it's in the original Nosferatu, is this girl um, who is married to Thomas, the solicitor, um, who is the main love interest and the main focus of Count Orlok's obsession. Um, is she is a sensitive. She is receptive to events that are beyond the natural world. She says at one point that she always knew what her Christmas presents would be, that she knew when her mother was going to pass away before it happened. And there was something else she said that I didn't catch or don't remember. Um, but uh, she has this sense. She has this second sight, and she was, uh, and it was her reaching out into the void that drew uh, Count Orlok from his centuries-long slumber uh, in the castle. That he was not an active vampire, unlike Count Dracula. He wasn't actively preying on anyone in the surrounding area. He hadn't been, um, you know, uh, he hadn't been this continuous dark presence on the land. He had just been in, I guess, Vampire the Masquerade calls it quiet. Is that right? Torpor. They
Torpor.
call it torpor.
Yeah, they weren't clear on that. That was a new twist. I believe that it wasn't as strong in the original Nosferatu. Sort of her she has terrible nightmares and everything. But that was sort of a twist um, on the story. Was that um, and it sort of turns the story on its head that she sort of willed this monster into action. Um, which great spoiler, by the way. If you haven't seen it now, I guess I don't think it'll ruin the movie for you, but that was a sort of interesting plot point. Um,
Is that a spoiler? That's like established in the first like 3 minutes of the movie.
um, Not mentioned in any of the trailers or anything,
I don't think
but
anything that comes up in the first 3 minutes of the movie is legitimately a spoiler.
I guess.
That
Um,
that's always been my theory. If you go and watch a movie and literally the first thing that happens in the movie, that is not a spoiler. You cannot spoil something that literally happens the first thing in the movie.
well, I'm not sure about that, but I don't think it's very important here, which is yeah. So let me address the things that you mentioned that were really really good. So the
Oh,
pictures.
but I had a point about that. I'm sorry. I had a
Okay, go
point
ahead.
about that. And my point was, I thought that I thought that her her being this sensitive, and I don't mean sensitive in terms of like emotionally sensitive. I mean her being this sort of
She's got
I don't want to use
ESP.
it.
She's got ESP.
Sorry,
ESP.
right? But it's not a. It wasn't a psychic thing. It's a spiritualist thing,
Sure.
right? It's not psionics. It's a mystical thing. It's a magical thing. It's not a psychic thing.
Like she can sense the spirit world.
She can sense the spirit world. That's right. She can sense the spirit world, and the this is what's so important to the movie. This is what I really liked about this specific vampire. And this reflects on my general theories about horror that I've been thinking about. He is far more clearly a supernatural presence in this movie than Dracula has been in any of the various incarnations I've seen. And I love that about the movie. He has an influence across, she has an influence across hundreds of miles, or even thousands of miles. I don't know how far, Transylvania is thousands of miles away from Germany. And he has an influence across thousands of miles to do things, a direct and real and measurable influence. And so does she. And whereas even the magical powers of the traditional Dracula are very immediate, they're very direct. He can change into a bat. He can change into a fog. He can look at you in the eyes and mesmerize you. Those are all personal magical powers. They're very clear cut. They're very immediate. It makes him into a superhero, right?
Yep.
Or a supervillain. These are very much more mystical. They're much more um, they're much more arcane. That makes him more horror-y. It brings him more into the domain of something like The Fog or a ghost story or something like that, where the people fighting him don't really know how to fight him necessarily. They don't really know how to defeat him. They have no idea. The doctor, who's the sort of Van Helsing equivalent, says, look, I've heard of several of these NOSFERATU, and all of them are different. All of them have different ways of fighting them, and I don't know which ones are true. I don't know how to fight him. It's all so beautifully indistinct, and they're taking risks based on incomplete information. And um, I thought that the movie didn't quite pull it off perfectly, but I loved what they were going for in that sense. Is that he was a real, there was a real sense of mystery about the character. Whereas when you come in with vampires, especially with classical vampires, especially with the Dracula tale, you always know who Dracula is. And then when he differs from Dracula, you're always like, oh, okay, well, you're making our Dracula is different sort of thing from TV tropes. But this was like, okay, he has these powers and we can see they're sort of working, but we just don't know what the extent of them are. And therefore, he's a much more menacing figure and he's a much more dangerous figure.
Yeah,
And then,
you nailed it. You nailed it. Like, one of the similarities between this story and the original Nosferatu was that in this story, this film, they don't open the movie by explaining what Dracula is.
yeah,
They don't have a cutscene that shows, him dying on a battlefield against the Turks, or selling his soul to Satan or whatever. Like, there's none of that. It begins with, and Nosferatu almost does, as you said, in the first couple of minutes they show the woman, played by Lily Depp, sort of invoking the demon, and that's it. There's no explanation of what the monster is. And that's one of the things that makes it a great monster movie.
And even the one time with the gypsies, and I loved the gypsies. They just and I don't care. Anyone listen to this, if you're offended by my using the term gypsies, I'm just using the term that was used in the movie. You're just gonna have to suffer. I don't care. Um, I love the gypsies because they seem so authentic to the time period of Romania, and to the costumes and everything. You could tell immediately what they were before they used that name. Um, but what the gypsies did that night, even though it was shown doing something, and you could tell that it probably worked, that something real was going on there. It wasn't just because what they did does not happen to normal, you know, if that had just been any old thing that they had gone on to hurt, right? If that had just been something they dug up, right?
Yep.
Um, but you still don't know if that would work on Orlok. He thinks it might work, and you have some indications it might work, but you don't know. And you don't know if that would even stop what they did, right? Even work. And I love that. I thought it was beautiful.
Uh,
Um,
I agree. It was. I mean, for me, I didn't think that scene was that deep. I think it just set up the audience's expectations for, a few minutes when um, the character tries the same thing on Orlok and fails.
yeah,
Um, I but I did enjoy that scene. That's a classic one in the story of Dracula. He arrives at the village, says, "Hey, I need a taxi up to the village," and everybody gets quiet. They're like, "Yeah, don't go there," right? That's always been part of the story. They did that really well. Um, it's definitely Robert Eggers' calling card to sort of have that, like, the costumes were all cool, the sets were great. He's no Herzog, but the dark and moody shots of the countryside going up into the mountains and the castle and everything, all very beautifully shot. I really liked the cinematography. Um, I liked keeping Orlok as a monster, because as uh, Plude the Druid says, Orlok was a demonic avatar of the very human base desire of hunger and the need to consume. And that's something that Orlok sort of explains at the very end, right before he's killed. And so it's just left him that monster the whole time. He wasn't. So the Count Dracula story, it's about sex and death, right? It's that carnal lust that manifests as this vampire and perverts it, and he kills people while draining them, right? So instead, more modern Dracula shows play into that, like especially ever since like the Bela Lugosi, this handsome dashing Dracula. He's sexy, he's mesmerizing, like you were saying about the mesmerization, right? um and Nosferatu, and both Nosferatus lean into the monstrous nature of it. Like nobody's fooling anybody here. Um, and one of the most horrible, and I mean that in the horror movie sense, one of the most um, terrifying aspects of the film is the way the woman reacts to the demon. The monster is right there in front of her, as the story goes, and her reaction is absolutely terrifying. It's absolutely horrible. Um,
I,
That part, I think, was excellently done. That was a good choice to keep him monstrous.
what I loved about Orlok is he is so very clearly um, something which is dead yet living.
Mhm.
Um, and you know what I'm talking about, on the back of his head, on his chest, just all over. Um, he looks like something that is dead, but which is alive. And his looks are a big, you know, a big mystery halfway through the movie. So I don't want to give that away to the audience, because you don't see that until later, and that's a big part of the mystery is exactly what he looks like. But you know what I'm talking about.
Yeah, absolutely.
And all along his back, all of that. It's just, again, I have no idea if that was part of the original Count Orlok. I just thought that is such an interesting interpretation of a vampire, and it's so perfect for a vampire to be something that is so clearly, this is a dead body. This is a body that should be dead. You could never, if you saw it, in the daylight, you could never mistake this for something living. But it's alive. Which is why he's, first, I can't go out in the day anyway, but it's why he is always shrouded himself in shadow, why he wears this big, huge coat with the collar all the way up that keeps his face in shadow, why he wears a big hat, why he's always covered in stuff, so that you never see him. So you can never tell those things about him unless he's, unless he chooses to. I thought the scenes where he invades that one house to finish off uh, his duties with that father, I thought
Yep.
those were absolutely chilling. Um, I loved the mystical way the mystical symbolism of his shadow and how his shadow operated in the movie. I thought that was fantastic. And I know that got parodied in Leslie Nielsen's Dead and Loving It, but so I know that's like a classic thing from movies that I haven't seen, but still, I
That's
thought it was very.
that's homage to Nosferatu, the original.
I know it's so I know it's been made fun of, but at the same time, uh, I know a lot of things that get made fun of in parody movies. Directors feel, oh, that's just stupid and silly now. We can't use that. So it happened to James Bond after the Austin Power movies, and I thought it was ballsy of Eggers to just say, you know what, I don't care. I'm going to do it, and I'm going to make it scary, and I'm going to make it, mystical, and I'm going to make it freaky, and I'm just going to do it. And it's okay that there was a parody movie that had this in it. Bam, it's here, and it works so well. I loved what he brings to the city when he crashes there. I haven't seen that in any other vampire movie. Again, maybe it's in the original Nosferatu, but I haven't seen that in any other vampire movie.
Oh yeah, that's classic Nosferatu. Yeah, you should Warpig, you should absolutely go see, stream the original 1922 Nosferatu Murnau, and you could also watch the Herzog Nosferatu. That was from like 74, 76 or something like that. It's gonna hit all the same story beats, 3 different ways of telling the story. Really good stuff.
There was a movie that I can't find that was about the making of Nosferatu, where the director found a real vampire to star as Count Orlok in Nosferatu.
Oh yeah, I don't remember the name of that. I remember that existed. Yeah.
I can't find it. I've always wanted to see that. Okay, so go see Nosferatu, the Eggers film, but also go see the Werner Herzog version and the 1920 version. Is what we're saying.
Absolutely. They're all good.
Okay.
They're all good. I'm on the fence as to which one I like best because they're all different. Um, I think next Halloween we'll find out. But um, reasons why I went out with kind of a feeling, I actually didn't like a lot of the dialogue. It got a little too campy sometimes.
Okay.
The uh, the lead actress, Ms. Depp, um, it's a thankless performance. Like, how do you play a woman tormented by her psychic powers and this demon haunting her? I don't know. Shadow of the Vampire. War Pig. That's the one you're looking for.
Shadow
Thanks,
of the
Brian.
Vampire. Okay.
So that stuff that I mentioned sort of takes away a little bit from all the good in the movie. I really enjoyed, like I said, the cinematography. It's very dark film, like actually physical. Like there's a lot of shots in the darkness, and that's going to turn some viewers off. It did not turn me off, but I could see people complaining about that. Um, Willem Dafoe, he was hit and miss throughout the film. Yeah, he really hams it up in his first couple of scenes, but then, as the terror takes hold of the German town and, they're desperately trying to fight Count Orlok, his manic performance makes sense. It's suits the actual story at that point. So it was really enjoyable. Um, and I don't know. I think it was good. I think it was good.
Yeah, I would definitely. People should know. There is violence. There is some nudity in it. And it is definitely not a movie to take kids to. Maybe older teens would be okay, depending on whether or not you want your kids exposed to horror movies, if they're okay with horror movies. But there is, it's a violent movie. It deals with heavy themes of insanity and darkness, and it's a horror movie. It's not an upbeat film.
Yep.
Is that a warning I have to put out there? And there is some nudity in it, so it's not like extensive nudity, but it is there, and just beware. And most of our audience is a little bit older anyway, so it's not necessarily for you, but those of you who listen who have kids, who maybe have teen kids, I'll just try to give you the information so you can decide whether or not you want to take your family to it. So, all right, it is time for us to go.
Yeah, let's call it. Good show. Glad talking to you. I'd like to appreciate everybody hanging out, listening to the chat. We picked up a few people after Arbit Over Worlds, so go check that out. I don't know what else to say. Great show. Go check out the horror movie. If you like horror movies, if you like NOSFERATU, you're gonna like this vision of it. And I hope everybody listening later really enjoys the show. War Pig, my brain's fried. Save me.
Okay. All right, folks. This is Geek Gab for Monday, January 6th, 2025. Thanks for tuning in. Be sure to click like and subscribe. And click the bell icon to get notifications as to when we're going live. We're also available on YouTube. We're also available on iTunes Store. We're available on Google Play Store, and we're available on SoundCloud.com. Do a search for Geek Gab. We are signing out for today. Don't you worry. Don't you fret. We will be back.